Welcome to Le Podcast de Philippe. Today we're going to dive into the world of photo authentication. And, especially with AI-generated images becoming more and more sophisticated, we're going to be looking at how the AFP, the Agence France-Presse, is fighting back against fake news. They've got a groundbreaking new system to guarantee the authenticity of photos. We'll also be talking about how this all relates to C2PA, this emerging industry standard. And we'll also touch on, other ways to spot those AI-generated pictures.
Yeah, it's really become a huge concern, especially with the rise of these AI-generated images. I mean, sometimes it's just impossible to tell them apart from the real deal.
Right. So let's start with this AFP system. What made them decide to come up with this technology?
Well, the AFP, you see, they got really worried about the impact of these fake images, on the credibility of news. They knew they needed a really strong system to make sure that the photos they were putting out there were actually real.
So they decided to, get ahead of the game instead of waiting for something bad to happen.
Exactly. In fact, they even tested out a prototype system during the U.S. elections using Nikon cameras that could embed a digital signature right when the picture is taken.
Oh, wow. So this digital signature, it's kind of like a birth certificate for the photo. It proves where it came from.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And this technology is really catching on. The AFP's trial was a big success, and pretty much all the major camera companies are planning to put this tech into their products soon.
That's amazing. So is this digital signature, is that the only thing they're doing to keep things secure?
No, they've got a bunch of layers of protection. They also use a secure server to store all the original photos. And anytime somebody edits a photo, they keep track of all those changes and they link them back to the original so you can always see exactly what happened to it.
Oh, I see. So even if someone messes with an image, you can still follow its trail back to the beginning.
You got it. And they've added another layer of security with an invisible watermark developed by a company called iMetag.
Interesting. How does that watermark thing work?
Well, imagine it like a fingerprint that's hidden inside the image. You can't see it, but it's there. And this fingerprint connects any changes made to the photo back to the original file.
So you're saying even if somebody crops the photo or resizes it, you can still tell if it's authentic?
Precisely. And anyone can check this using a plugin called WeVerify. It makes the whole process transparent and builds trust.
Wow, it sounds like the AFP is really setting a new standard for photojournalism in this digital age.
I think so, yeah. Now, how does all this tie into the C2PA standards you were talking about earlier?
Well, C2PA, that stands for Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just for photos. It's an open source standard they use to make sure all sorts of digital content is authentic.
And I hear it's getting a lot of support from some big names in tech, like Google, Microsoft, even OpenAI.
Oh, really? So this is going to be a lot bigger than just photojournalism then?
Definitely. C2PA, it's supposed to authenticate any digital content you see. They embed metadata about how it was made, when it was edited, who the author is, even who owns it. Think of it like a nutrition label, but for digital content. It gives users a way to verify its entire history. Yeah, it's a really ambitious project. It could totally change how we think about digital content.
This sounds like a pretty big deal, but are there any, downsides to CDPA or things that might make it hard to use?
Well, one problem is that sometimes the metadata can get lost, like when you share an image online, especially on social media.
Oh, so even if an image starts out with that C2PA metadata, it might not always stay with it.
Right, exactly. And another thing is that for C2PA to really work, everyone needs to use it. We need the people making the content, the platforms they're sharing it on, and all the software developers to be on board.
So it's kind of like a universal language. It only works if everybody speaks it.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. And that's why things like the AFP system are so important. They're showing how C2PA can be used in the real world and proving its value. And that's helping to get more people to adopt it.
So it's like they're leading by example. Okay, so apart from what the AFP is doing in this C2PA standard, what other ways are there to make sure photos are real, especially with AI getting so good at making fake images?
Well, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. AI isn't just being used to create images, they're using it to spot fake ones too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they've got these AI-powered tools that can look for telltale signs that an image has been manipulated.
So it's like AI fighting AI.
Exactly. And then there's metadata analysis. Even if an image doesn't have those C2PA credentials, you can still learn a lot from the metadata that's already in the file.
So metadata can be like a digital fingerprint, even if it's not part of the C2PA system. What kind of stuff can you find out from metadata?
Well, you can find out things like what kind of camera was used to take the picture, what software was used to edit it, even where the photo was taken.
It's like having a digital detective working on the case. Are there any other techniques people use?
Oh, sure. Reverse image search is still really useful. You just upload the image to a search engine, like Google Images, and it'll tell you if that image already exists online. That can help you see if it's been altered or if someone's trying to pass it off as something it's not.
So we've got a whole bunch of tools we can use to check images. What about those times when you really need to be sure, like when the stakes are high?
Well, that's when you bring in the forensic experts. They have special software and techniques they use to examine every single pixel in an image. They can spot even tiny signs of tampering that you wouldn't be able to see with the naked eye.
So for those really important photos, we have experts who can dig deep and figure out what's really going on. So what does all this mean for photographers, especially those who make a living from taking pictures?
It's a good question. For photographers, these new technologies are a way to protect their work. They can make sure that people know their images are authentic and that nobody's using them without permission.
Yeah, it sounds like these tools could really help photographers fight back against all the fake stuff out there
Oh,
and make sure nobody's using their pictures without asking.
absolutely. And as more people start using these technologies, they'll probably become the standard for stock photo sites, which will make things safer and more trustworthy for both the photographers and the people buying the pictures.
So if photographers want to get ahead of the game, they should start using these technologies now.
Exactly. They should look into things like Adobe content credentials and think about getting cameras and software that are compatible with C2PA. And they need to stay up to date on all the latest standards. Things are changing so fast in this field. If photographers want to be successful, they need to stay ahead of the curve.
It feels like we're moving into a whole new world of photography, where being able to prove a photo is real is just as important as taking a good picture in the first place.
I agree. In a world where AI can create practically anything, knowing for sure that a photo is authentic is more important than ever.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of photo authentication, is there anything you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing to take away from this is that we all have a responsibility to be careful about the images we see. We can't just assume that every picture is real anymore. We need to ask questions, do some research, and use the tools we have to check if an image is authentic, especially now that AI is getting so good at creating fakes.
So you're saying we all need to be more like detectives when it comes to the images we see online.
Yes, exactly. And remember, in the end, it's up to each of us to decide what's true and what's not.
Well, thank you for joining us for this fascinating look at the world of photo authentication. If you want to learn more about this, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, the podcast de Philippe. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers today, so your support would really mean a lot.